So, Julie, you may um, want to help me with the chat, you know, to
Yeah, I can do that. That's not a problem, Sharon.
um,
Do you
yeah,
want me to kind of watch it and see if it's appropriate with what you're talking about to ask? And then if not, we'll just kind of wait until the end and kind of do that sort of stuff.
yeah, yeah,
I can
yeah,
do that.
not too many interruptions, but if there's something pertinent,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
Okay.
so I was gonna say,
If
good
there's
morning.
something pertinent or if you pause and decide to ask me for any reason, then I'll let you know. But otherwise, I can hold it till the end. That is not a problem.
We're gonna email the presentation to everybody or a link to it right after the presentation. Yeah, with it. Yeah.
Yeah, Kate always sends all that stuff, the video and the presentation and all that. So it's 10:59. You got about 31 people waiting. You want me to start letting people in?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sharon Rich. I will be your host today and your presenter. Thank you for attending the webinar on Special Needs Trust for Varied Populations. We will be providing continuing ed credits for guardians and attorneys, and you will receive an email from Kate at trustagent.org within the next week that will have a certificate of attendance. And of course, for guardians, we will be inputting your continuing ed into CE Broker for you. We'll also be emailing a copy of the presentation or at least a link to it after the meeting today. So we have a large audience. I ask that you put your questions into chat and we will leave time at the end to answer them. Again, I am your speaker today. My name is Sharon Rich, and I am the Senior Trust Advisor for Aged. I'll introduce myself. I have a finance degree from UCF. I am a certified trust and financial advisor and also a certified senior advisor. I have been in the trust industry for 33 years. And been with Aged for 12, and I lead the trust team here at Aged, where primarily we manage special needs trust. So we are happy to always be a resource to you. We're going to go ahead and get started today. So I am going to share my screen. Hold on a second. Let me get this over here. Okay. Julie, is that showing up correctly on the, okay, very good. All right. So we're going to talk about different types of trust today. Aged was started back in 2002 with a mission to support the advocacy and guardianship for elderly and disabled individuals. And we primarily manage special needs trust. We are located in Central Florida, and we serve the entire state of Florida, though. We have no minimums or maximums. So we are an alternative oftentimes for larger institutions that have those minimums and maximums. Nick Barton is our executive director, and our legal advisor is a Hoyt & Bryan firm. Randy Bryan is a top elder law attorney in the state of Florida. Today, we are going to talk about the differences between revocable and irrevocable trust and what are special needs trust, who can benefit. We're going to go through the different types of special needs trust, first party, third party, and I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to talk a little bit about the responsibilities of a trustee, who should serve, and when a special needs trust might be a good option for you or your clients or someone that you know. And please remember, I am not an attorney. This presentation is for educational purposes only, not considered to be legal advice. So let's start with revocable trust. When someone talks about a revocable trust, this is something that can be modified. It can be amended. It can be terminated by the person that established the trust, the grantor. So if I wanted to put my assets into the name of a revocable trust, I could potentially do that. Often, the reason people do that is to avoid probate. Now, an irrevocable trust is something that cannot be modified, amended, or terminated without permission of the beneficiaries. So we used to say just cannot be changed. And it basically is, you look at it that way, but there are ways to make minor modifications to an irrevocable trust. Nothing real major, but minor things as the administration of the trust goes on. The grantor, the person that established the trust, is transferring all rights of ownership. And this is often used for tax benefits. There's, creditor protection, or for protecting government benefits in the case of special needs trust. Living trust, inter vivos trust. These are trusts that are established during the grantor's lifetime. They can be revocable or irrevocable. So if I establish a trust in like my name as a revocable grantor trust, that's my living trust. But I could also establish an irrevocable trust during my lifetime for someone else. That's called an inter vivos trust because I established it during my lifetime. Testamentary trusts are funded after death, and that's often done through the terms of a will or in a revocable trust that now becomes irrevocable at death. Testamentary trusts are always irrevocable. So when you're looking at trust documents, you're going to see different terminology. A grantor, trust, or settler are basically the same person. It's the person who creates the agreement, signs the trust document, and generally transfers the property into the trust. The beneficiary is the person who receives the current benefit from the trust. The final remainder beneficiaries can also be known as heirs or remainderment. These are the persons or organizations that receive trust funds after the death of the current beneficiaries or per terms of the trust. Some trusts are done such that they terminate upon a certain age. The trustee or the fiduciary is the person or the organization that manages the trust. So those are your basic terms that you'll see in the trust documents. A special needs trust is a trust. Hold on. Okay, so we're going to go into what is a special needs trust. This is a type of trust that is designed to protect government benefits for an individual with disabilities. We're going to go into a little bit more about special needs trust and how the distributions are used to supplement the public benefits. Special needs trust, I often get questions, what can you put into a special needs trust? It depends on the type of trust, but generally you can put personal property, real property, cash, even life insurance proceeds. People ask, what are the benefits of a special needs trust? The funds in a special needs trust do not count as beneficiary resources. Some trusts protect income. So in other words, when the beneficiary is on benefits by putting money into the trust, that money does not count against them for government benefits. And there's no 5-year look back period. A lot of people say, well, I put in the money into the trust. Is there a 5-year look back? Not in a special needs trust. The day you put the money into the trust is the day you can, qualify or apply for Medicaid. One of the benefits is there's no Medicaid spend down. You hear from the nursing homes often, your wards or beneficiaries might go into a nursing home and the nursing home says, well, you can just private pay and spend down all your assets and then you can qualify for Medicaid. By putting the money into a trust, special needs, you do not have to spend all that money down. So it's going to preserve the money and make the money last longer. This often allows someone to stay in the community longer and give them more independence. Guardianship fees can be paid from special needs trust also. So it's a way to help make the money last longer to provide for guardianship services. It also provides investment and administration guidance, distribution guidance for persons with disabilities. Special needs trusts are really all about improving the quality of life for someone with a disability. In our world, we deal with Medicaid a lot. because all of our beneficiaries at Aged are either on or applying for Medicaid. We deal with a varied population. We deal with people who cannot afford medications and copays. We deal with people that need long-term care for nursing home or assisted living, people who can no longer work because of a disability. They're often younger people who have had an accident or some kind of medical condition that prevents them from working. And your developmentally disabled adults very often need Medicaid. So there's different types of trusts that will help these different types of people. We deal with all of these different Medicaid programs. Our clients are on a variety of programs. Very often when you are working with someone, maybe you meet them for the first time and you're trying to figure out what benefits they're on, it can be very confusing because there are so many different programs. That's where, our expertise comes in. Your elder law attorneys can help you understand these things. And Aged has a lot of webinars on the different Medicaid programs. Medicaid in Florida is all about financial limits. They look at monthly income, gross income, and they look at monthly and your countable assets. The main programs that we all deal with in our industry working with seniors and persons with disabilities is the top one here called ICP, or Home and Community-Based Services. Note the income limit is $2,829 a month in income and $2,000 in countable assets. And then we deal with medical Medicaid, which has different limits. The point in showing you this chart is that different strokes for different folks, okay? What do they need? What's going to benefit them, and how can they qualify? So I'm going to go into, primarily today, we're talking about special needs trust. First party trust and third party trust are the two main types of special needs trust. And within your first party trust, you have three different types called D4A, D4B, and D4C. You may have heard those before. We call a D4A a disability trust. A D4B is your income trust, your qualified income trust. And a D4C is a pooled trust. Those are all under basically the same federal code you can see there. Third-party trusts are different, and we're going to talk about the differences. Third-party trusts can be there's a trust document that can be drafted by an attorney, a standalone trust document. It can be a trust inside of somebody's will or inside of their revocable living trust that now becomes irrevocable at death. It can also be a testamentary trust under your will. I'm going to explain to you what those differences are. Basically, the way to think about it is first-party trusts are where the beneficiary's money is going into it. Third-party trusts are where a third party's money is going into it. It's not the beneficiary's money going into it. So if you're managing any of these types of trusts, make sure if you have a third-party trust, you're not putting your beneficiary's money into it. This is a chart that we have that kind of summarizes the different, qualities of the trust and what's allowed. So you can see that the D4A, B, and C here are first party under the chart. But look, they contain different things. Under a qualified income trust, you can only put income into the trust. You cannot put your savings into the trust. It's monthly income. They're used by, people in different circumstances, which will become apparent as we go through the slides today. There's rules on who can manage these types of trusts too. So under the pooled trust, you see that only a nonprofit organization can manage a pooled trust. So there's 10 to 12 pooled trust companies throughout the state of Florida. Aged is just one. Now, the other types of trust can be managed by individuals, companies like banks or institutions, or nonprofit individuals. And they're all used a little bit differently. And they have different age limitations. Notice in the D4A, you can only establish this trust and fund it if you're under 65. Okay. Now, and they have different rules upon death. So I'm going to go through some slides that give us these differences and show us its differences. Okay. So first party trust, considered to be self-settled. In other words, it's the beneficiary's money going into the trust. It can be an inheritance that was given to, a person with a disability. It can be a gift, but it is the beneficiary's money. It can be savings. It can be from a settlement. All of those types of, as long as it's the beneficiary's money, it can go into a first party trust. Requires payback provision. That is one of the main things that the federal government says. If you beneficiary are disabled and you're putting your money into a special needs trust, we're not going to count it for your government benefits. But at the end, when you pass away, you need to the trust needs to reimburse Medicaid to the extent that Medicaid spent money on you. Okay. And that's true for all three of the types of first party special needs trust. So D4A, these trusts can only be created when someone is under 65. So this says no contributions are permitted after age 65. This is an individually drafted trust by an attorney. It is created by either the disabled individual themselves, a parent, a grandparent, a legal guardian, or the court can actually establish this trust and sign it. Now, the main, these are done when someone's under 65. The only time you're going to be adding money to this type of trust after the age of 65 is if there's a structured settlement, like a monthly payment that is assigned to the trust. So that is allowed, but otherwise, pretty much no contributions after age 65. We have a sole benefit rule in these first party trusts. The funds can be used only for the beneficiary. Upon death, you must pay Medicaid back. You can name heirs to receive funds after Medicaid is paid back if there, is any money left. So there's some of the main rules. So let's give an example of someone that this may be appropriate for. Patricia is a housekeeper, with no children. And when she was 40, she had a bad car accident. She had a traumatic brain injury, a broken back, leg, punctured lungs, became depressed. Patricia applied to Social Security, got put on disability benefits, based on her earnings record, she earned a little bit in the SSDI of 300, and then they supplemented her Social Security disability with the SSI payment. So she's getting a total of $943 a month, and she has no savings. How is she going to pay for her care? She's going to need home care, assisted living, doctor's visits, medications, procedures. And she's got Medicare and Medicaid because of her government benefits now, but Medicaid only allows you to have $2,000 in savings. Right now, that's fine, but she, got a personal injury settlement of $400,000. So if she just put that money into her name, she's going to lose her Medicaid. She's going to lose her SSI. So that's not a good thing for her. She's going to need those government benefits. Putting the money into a D4A trust is one way that Patricia can actually protect her Medicaid benefits. Now she can make her money last longer. She'll get the $943 a month. She'll have her Medicare and her Medicaid, and her money's going to last a lot longer. So this is an example sometimes of when, people use the D4As. They get the settlements and they put the money into the D4A trust. Now, many of you have probably heard of a qualified income trust. I get a lot of questions. Oh, why can't I use the qualified income trust for this or that? Okay. You can only put income into the trust. So if someone's trying to qualify for nursing home Medicaid, ICP, and sometimes assisted living it works for, but their income is too high. Remember that chart I showed you with about $2,800 limit? If the income is too high for that, they can use this qualified income trust to run the income through. It reduces the countable income by doing that. The rules around a qualified income trust, though, are very restricted on what you can pay out of it. You can only pay, one of the things you can pay for is patient responsibility to the nursing home. So that's the, amount you have to pay to the nursing home every month, which is your income less $160. You can use the money in the qualified income trust for your personal needs allowance, the $160. If you have unreimbursed medical expenses, you can pay that out of a QIT. And there's something called spousal allowance, which I won't really go into today, but sometimes income gets diverted to the spouse, the community living at home, if you're married, and that spousal allowance is allowed to be paid to the spouse out of this trust. I'm going to give you an example on the next slide. Now, if you have a qualified income trust and you pass away, all the money is going to go back to Medicaid. So this is not an accumulation trust. It is a put the income in, pay it out. Upon death, if there's anything left, you got to pay Medicaid back. It can be established by the beneficiary themselves. A spouse, even without a power of attorney, can do that. Somebody with a power of attorney can establish a qualified income trust for the court. Okay. Trustees can be individuals, professionals. Here's an example. We've got Robert, who's 82, lives in a home by himself, and he had a stroke and he fell. He goes to rehab, but he's not safe to go back home. He's going to need skilled nursing. Okay, so he has a nice pension and Social Security payment every month of $4,000. He's way over the limit for income for Medicaid. He's got $10,000 in savings. So Robert decides, I want to do a qualified income trust. I'm going to prepay for my funeral and get my savings down below the Medicaid limit of $2,000. So now he's reduced his savings to $1,000, but he's still over income to qualify for the nursing home. So his daughter goes to an attorney and has the attorney draft a qualified income trust. The daughter is the trustee. She opens up a QIT account at the bank. She just goes down to the bank with her trust document. And then she's going to set up a transfer. So she's going to keep the Social Security, the checking account where his Social Security is going. And every month she's going to transfer the patient responsibility into the QIT. So you got to pay your income, that $4,000 less 160 to the nursing home. So she's going to transfer $38.40 every month into the QIT checking account. She's going to pay and then pay the facility. She's going to keep 160 in the checking account and use that for Robert's personal needs. But in this scenario, Robert still has a house. How are the house expenses going to get paid for? If he sells his house, what's he going to do with the funds? Okay, you can't pay house expenses out of a QIT. Okay, so you have to keep in mind there's rules around what you can and can't pay out of a QIT. I'm going to give you an example a little bit later on how a pool trust might be able to help Robert, might even be a better option for Robert because he's going to have those funds from the house that he cannot put into the QIT. So the pool trust, the concept behind a pool trust is that there is a master trust document. There's one trust document. Aged has our master trust. We created that and signed it. Funds can be pooled together for investment purposes under the trust and the legal rules. But everybody is going to have an individual account. So you do that by signing a joiner agreement. So the trust, a pool trust is going, each beneficiary is going to have their own individual account, but via a joiner agreement. So that's a fill in the blank document that gets signed. Okay. Income and assets can be transferred into a pool trust. So there's no limitation on age. Okay. There is a limitation that you have to be disabled. That means if you're under 65, you're on SSI or SSDI benefits. If you're 65 or older, you have to submit medical records to when you apply for Medicaid, and the Department of Elder Affairs will do a disability determination. Okay, so basically one of the rules around using a pooled special needs trust is you have to be disabled. Any age can use it, but if you're over 65, you have to prove to the department that you are disabled, which means you're unable to work in substantial gainful activity. Okay, if you are 72 or older, every impairment is going to be considered to be severe. So we often do, pre-qualified people make sure we think they're going to qualify as being disabled if they're a senior. The trust can be used to pay for things that government benefits don't pay for, as long as it's for their sole benefit. Okay, now if someone's on the SSI benefit, many of you know, you can't, we have restrictions on paying for housing expenses. And at death, the funds in the pool trust can be used or can be used to pay Medicaid back. And if heirs have been named in the trust, any balance after Medicaid can go to the heirs. So I have an example here for you on that. Okay. These are the federal rules. We get people that say this sounds too good to be true. Well, I can assure you that we're following all the federal codes, the Social Security codes, and the DCF codes that allow disabled individuals to put assets and income into the pooled trust to qualify for Medicaid. All right. So here's an example of what happens at death. In the aged pooled trusts, I can really only speak to what our pooled trust documents say, but you 100% can be retained by the nonprofit. And then the nonprofit uses it for their nonprofit mission. Okay. In aged's case, we can actually use it to fund a pooled trust for another disabled beneficiary, as long as we have the proper documentation on file prior to death. So again, there's two options in aged's joiner agreement at death. Either 100% is retained by aged, okay, and we do these things with it, with our retained funds, or 10% is retained by aged. Medicaid is then paid back, and then it can go to the heirs that are stated in the trust documents. Okay. So people ask, what happens if there's not enough money to pay Medicaid back? I'll give you an example. We have a pooled trust and somebody passes away and there's $20,000 left in the trust. They've been in a nursing home for a year. Okay, that lien from Medicaid is going to be more than $100,000. So there's not enough money in the pooled trust to pay Medicaid back. In that case, aged, the nonprofit, is going to retain the $20,000 in the trust. Now, let's say that they had been on maybe a different type of Medicaid, or they passed away unexpectedly very quickly, and the lien was only $10,000. Okay, agent's going to keep 10%. We're going to pay Medicaid back, and then the balance is going to be split among the heirs. So these are the basic rules around, what happens at death in a pooled trust. Some pooled trust companies only allow for the pooled trust to retain the money. Okay. Some allow for like an estate to be named. Some allow, like us, actually can name individual heirs. Okay. So different, trusts have different rules, but within the federal guidelines. One of the things that aged has, there's a lot of guardians on the call today, and I know most of you know about our Guardianship Benevolent Fund. It's one of our nonprofit missions to support indigent guardianship. We also have a durable medical equipment program that we provide equipment to persons in need, walkers, wheelchairs, hospital beds, all sorts of stuff. So if you're local and you don't know about that, please contact us. We have lots of equipment that we just donate out after we collect it. All righty. So I'm going to give you an example of Andy, who's going to use a pooled trust. He's 78 years old. He lives in a manufactured home, and he's got lots of, medical conditions. He's spending $300 a month in medications, and he needs knee surgery. Okay. He's got an Advantage plan. Advantage plans have out-of-pocket maximums every year of somewhere around $5,000, but they also have co-pays. Andy has about $30,000 in his savings, but if you look at his income, his expenses are exceeding his income. He's got rent, utilities, food, and his medication costs, his co-pays, his premium costs, all of that. Andy's under guardianship. So Andy's going into the hole, $1,000 every month. His money's only going to last 2.5 years, and he needs his knee surgery. He's a good candidate to potentially use a pooled trust to reduce medication and copay cost. QMB is a great program. I'm not going to spend too much time on this today, but note the income limit is less than the limit for long-term care. It's $1,255 a month, but the asset limit is $9,430. Okay. If Andy can qualify for QMB, his meds are going to be less than $12. He's not going to have to pay a Part D premium. He's not going to have to pay a Part B premium. That gets paid back in his Social Security check. And all his deductibles are covered by Medicaid and the copays. So basically, Andy doesn't pay anything for his health care, except for small copays for his medications. He's not allowed to be billed when he goes to the doctor because he's got his QMB. Doctors can't bill him for any copays. Not allowed. Okay. So how does that work? We look at someone's income and their assets that's in their bank. The overage can be put into the pooled trust, and the pooled trust uses it to pay bills. It's really that simple. Okay. The overage goes into the trust, that reduces your countable income and assets, and the trust uses it to pay bills. So in Andy's case, he's got $30,000. He's going to put $22,000 into the trust to reduce its countable assets because below the QMB limit. He's got to get his monthly income below the limit. So every month, $800 gets transferred from checking into trust. Okay, we can do that automatically for him. Then he applies to DCF, shows them all the pooled trust documents, shows them proof of deposits, gets qualified. What is that going to do for him? It's awesome. It's going to reduce his medication cost to $30 a month. So he's saving $270 a month. No copays for the doctors and the hospitals. He has his knee surgery, pays nothing. He goes to physical therapy, and the rehab is free. Okay. His Social Security check is going to go up by $174.70 because Medicaid is paying his Part B premium, which is an offset to the trustee fee. So Andy is going to be able to get the health care that he needs. He's going to be able to afford it, and his money is going to last longer. Now, I've even seen ads on television right now because we're in open enrollment period. You may qualify for a dual eligible special needs plan. That's what Andy will have when he gets qualified for QMB. So it's an awesome program. He can get a, United has a dual eligible Medicare, Medicaid plan. It gives you extra dental coverage, extra vision coverage. You get a prepaid card that you can, spend on different things, and sometimes utilities are covered, et cetera. So QMB can really help a lot of people. When you have a pooled trust, we can pay lots of things. Guardianship fees, you need to get a court order first. Caregiver, companions, if there's any therapies or transportations that aren't covered. Travel, cell phones, we pay a lot of, vehicle insurance, house payments. We buy computers, televisions, furniture, pay for pet needs, all sorts of stuff that are paid for out of the trust, as long as it's for the sole benefit of Andy. Okay. He has a fall now and he goes back to rehab, and his rehab's not going very well. So now he needs to go into skilled nursing. So we got to get him below. We're just going to switch his Medicaid program and get him qualified for long-term care. So we're going to change the amount that he puts into the trust. He can put more savings in to get him below the $2,000 limit. And now the trust can pay for the nursing home. So, we're going to put his monthly income into the trust, his overage, pay the nursing home, and now all his medical bills are paid for. This is a way to get him qualified and not have him spend down to go into the nursing home. Okay, his money's going to last longer. He's going to get the care that he needs. Here's the limits again. I'm not going to go through this, but basically the example that I showed you with Andy using a pooled trust, if he didn't use a pooled trust for long-term care, his money would have lasted 3 months. With a pooled trust, it's going to last 5 years. So pooled trust has a joiner and fee agreement always. The joiner always has to be notarized, witnessed properly. Please be very careful about how that gets done. We see a lot of joiners provided to our office that are not executed properly. It's got to be 2 witnesses and a notary. Need IDs, all of that. Agent accepts the documents or whatever pool trust company you're requiring or you're using. And you need a court order if you're a guardian to establish and fund the trust. And we have sample court orders on our website. And then you're going to provide a copy of all of that to Medicaid so that your client can get Medicaid that you need. What are the options at death in a pooled trust company? So, like I said, there are multiple pooled trusts throughout the state. You should ask these questions. What options are available upon death? Can heirs be named? What do they do with if these things are important to you? What do they do with the retained funds? What are the options? Fees, investments, trust statements. How often do they provide trust statements? I'll give you an example of what we do. We provide quarterly trust statements to our clients. And we also have online access so someone can go in and view their accounts at any time. So that's important to ask. You want that transparency so you can see what's going on in the account at any time. Disbursement request. How does a pool trust company handle that? How do you submit them? What's the turnaround time? Do they have any benefit expertise? Assistance. Many of you know we have 2 benefit specialists in our office because we really like to help. We like to be a resource to the community. And what is the company's checks and balances? What's their process, for approvals? Who's on their board? Do they have professional liability insurance? Do they have an audit? All of those things that you can ask. All right, I want to go through third-party trust. These are trusts funded with the assets of third parties, generally a parent, a grandparent, sometimes a family or a friend. Again, this can be created under somebody's will or their revocable trust. So will can say, disabled Robert's, I'm leaving my funds in trust for my disabled son, Robert. And then that trust language is right inside the will, okay, or inside the revocable trust. Or it can be a standalone trust, a separate document that's already been created. No Medicaid payback is required at death. So this is why parents of children with disabilities should go to an attorney and make sure their estate plan is in order. You want to put the money directly into a special needs trust for the disabled individual at your death. Because if it goes to them individually, you haven't done your planning, it's first party and there's Medicaid payback when that person dies. In a third party, if the money goes directly from, mom into special needs trust for disabled Robert, there's no Medicaid payback at Robert's death. And you can name individuals, professionals, nonprofits. Aged does serve for these types of trusts. So I'm going to give you an example of a third-party trust. Susan is a widow with 3 children. One child has a bipolar schizophrenic disability, cognitive issues, and is on SSI. Susan's will leaves 50% to each non-disabled child outright. Then she creates a third-party trust with an attorney, separate document during her lifetime for her disabled child. She has a life insurance policy, and she names that third-party trust as the beneficiary of her life insurance. This is a great way to fund a special needs trust for a disabled child. Upon her death, the life insurance proceeds go into the third-party trust. The trustee uses the money to supplement the care for the disabled child. Okay, choosing a trustee is very important for those types of things. Now, Susan could have done this also, if she didn't have a life insurance policy, she could have left 1/3 outright to the non-disabled, and then left 1/3 inside the supplemental needs trust with all that language inside her will. Okay, so different ways to do it, but the point is it has to go directly into the trust at death for the disabled person. So a lot of people think being named as a trustee is an honor, and in a lot of ways it is, but it also comes with a lot of responsibilities. The trustee has to carry out the instructions in the trust document. So you need to know how to read the trust document, you need to understand what it says, understand the distributions, what you're allowed to distribute and what you're not, and government benefits. If you distribute certain things from a trust for an individual on SSI, you might be jeopardizing their benefits. Taxes, you got to do tax returns, accountings, investments. You have a fiduciary duty to be objective and impartial. So if a family member is named, sometimes that becomes very difficult. We at Aged get calls fairly frequently for trusts being managed by a family member, and now they just don't want to do it anymore, can't do it anymore, just it's too much, and they want a professional to take over. So your trustee options: a trust company, a bank. There's some nonprofit trustee. Again, that's the only option for pooled trust. Some nonprofit pooled trust companies will serve under the third-party trust. Some will not. CPA, a lawyer, a family, friends, social worker, guardian, combination of the above. Just here's some of your options to consider. All right, I believe in a team approach to serving our clients. There are legal advisors, the counseling, the planning, the drafting. Agent's not, we're not attorneys. So someone's got, money, they need to get legal advice on what their options are, and that. So, and we sometimes, we very often work with attorneys and clients and talk to people before they decide to do the trust. Financial advisors can help with the needs analysis, sometimes the record keeping, accounting. Medical advisors, right? You need someone to help oversee the medical care, the trustees, the caregivers, and then you've got, sometimes trust protectors are named. You've got guardians, care managers, social workers, clergy, it's sometimes take the village to make sure the person is really being taken care of. So it's not just a trustee, usually. This is the chart I showed you at the beginning, which is a nice summary of what we talked about today. I'm a very visual person and I like charts. And I'm going to just go over this slide that talks about when to use a special needs trust. Again, you've got a senior or a person with a disability, can't afford medications, can't afford doctors and hospital copays. They're going into a nursing home. Maybe they're in a group home and their patient account is getting to be too much. ABLE accounts are great options in that case. Sometimes a pooled trust makes sense in that case also. You're on Medicaid and you receive money, proceeds from the sale of a home, an inheritance, or a settlement. Often we open trusts for that reason. Or you've got someone on the wait list for the home and community-based services, and they get off the wait list. Now they're over the income or the asset limit. We often do trusts for people on the wait list for the QMB, the medical Medicaid, while they're waiting. Or last but not least, you need to leave money to an individual with a disability. So those are all your reasons for using a special needs trust. And we have a lot of resources here that you can link to. And I do thank you for attending. This is our contact information, which I also put into the chat at the beginning. Somebody's waiting to enter the waiting room, I see. Julie. So I'm gonna look to the chat now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oops. And move this back over here.
Yeah, we had a couple of people saying good morning, but no questions. Kimberly wants to know if copies of the slides are available, and yes, we will make those available to you guys. But if you have any questions, if you want to put it in the chat, now's the time.
So I know it was a lot of information, but people ask all the time, what are my trust options? The revocable, the irrevocable, the special needs trust. There's probably other ones that I didn't go over today, but hopefully you got the gist of, the differences in the trust. And again, we like to be a resource because this is all we do. We live and breathe this stuff, even though we're not attorneys. Okay, let's see. I've got a question from Amy. My client has an SNT and I wanted to make sure I can put funds from her upcoming home sale into her trust. So you need to make sure that it's a first party trust. The D4A, she'd have to be under 65 for that. If it's a pooled trust, for her, you should be able to put the money into the pooled trust. Okay, if it's a third party trust, in other words, it was funded with somebody else's money, you don't want to be putting her money into it. So it depends on what type of trust it is, Amy. Okay. Robin wants to know, is a supplemental needs trust Medicaid approved? So yes, the federal supplemental needs trust is usually used in the context of the third party trust. So there is federal code, federal regulation that talks about third party trust as not counting, as an asset for somebody that's on government benefits. So when you say Medicaid approved, you might mean, do you need to like submit it to Medicaid? And technically, I mean, the answer is yes, you should be. What I've seen anyway, okay, again, I'm not an attorney, but I have worked with attorneys that do the third party trust gets funded. And if someone's on Social Security, they're going to tell Social Security about the trust, but it's not supposed to count against them. There may be a differences of opinion there, but actually you are supposed to notify the government. Are we still able to use pooled trust for someone over 65? Lawrence, hi. Yes. DCF came out with some ruling probably 3 years ago now, somewhere around that time frame, that said they didn't want people using pooled trusts for people over 65, or there'd be a penalty period. They weren't going to allow them. That never got implemented. They pulled back because the elder law community pushed back, talked with DCF a lot, and they never implemented that. So you are able to use a pooled trust when you're over 65. The only real restriction or thing you need to think about is when someone is on SSI, supplemental security income, that $943 a month, and they're 65 or older. Funding, if let's say they get a inheritance, funding a pooled trust for someone on SSI 65 or older can cause a penalty period with SSI, with Social Security. Typically what's being done now about that is that when notice is given to Social Security, a spending plan is done. And this is only for the people that are on the SSI benefit, okay? And the spending plan will need to show that the money being put into the pooled trust will be used during or over that person's lifetime. And in that case, generally, the government is not going to penalize those SSI recipients. If not, the government can penalize. They can take away your SSI for like up to a period of 3 years. So there's different, I'm happy to kind of, you can talk through that with or I'm happy to talk through that a little bit more with you. But from DCF standpoint, there's no problem with that anymore. With a pooled, okay, and the pooled trust is spelled POOLED. Do you make out the payment, or does the guardian to pay bills such as the rent to the ALF and stuff? If a guardian is going to establish a pooled trust for their ward, okay, you get the court order, fund the trust. For bills to be paid, you as the guardian, you're going to be the advocate in the trust. You as the advocate are going to submit a disbursement request form along with the supporting documentation. So you got an ALF bill you want us to pay, just fill out our disbursement form, attach a copy of the assisted living bill, and email it to us. Okay, so age of the trustee, the pooled trust trustee, has to write the checks. Okay. Are your payments made out auto to ALF? Yes, we can set up recurring payments. Anything that's the same amount every month, we can set up to on recurring payments. Okay. If it changes, then there's always a beneficiary advocate on the joiner agreement, the legal document. Whoever that beneficiary advocate is the one submitting the bills to us. So if it's a different amount, then you need to send that to us every month. You were typing quickly. You got it. All righty. So, well, it's good to see some names I haven't seen in a while. I appreciate y'all being on the call. It is 12 o'clock now, and I don't see any more questions in the chat. We are going to take a break in December from our webinars, and we'll be back having webinars in January again on the second Wednesday at 11 o'clock, like this has been. And if you have any ideas or suggestions for topics, we are always happy to take your topics. We haven't lined up all of the speakers for next year yet. So we appreciate, any input you might have on that. We're happy to see what we can do. I just have one more with a QMB. Does person still pay copay on pharmacy? Yes. So you pay a small copay. You have the extra help benefit. So your copay should be less than $12. But yes, there is a copay. Well, we are in the holiday season. Ronald, thank you for the happy holidays thought. And I do wish good holiday season to everybody. And thank you for attending. Bye-bye.